You already had the chance, and you stepped back. Not because you were lazy, not because you were ungrateful, not because you did not understand what was in front of you. You saw the opening. You felt the number get bigger. You imagined the door moving. And then, almost without noticing, you made yourself smaller again. This is why your wealth is already inside you, but it has not been allowed to become your life yet. I know what it feels like to call it timing when it is really hesitation. I know what it feels like to say, I am being smart, when something deeper is asking, what happens if they expect more from me now? You leave money on the table and tell yourself you are not greedy. You undercharge and call it kindness. You delay asking for the raise because you want to wait until things calm down. Equate vils, tics, and when providing any other zivil. Is the momentu offic, what was on this post-midge period wheel of bottle of kick still gooding. So let me ask you something that may stay with you longer than this video. What would you have to admit about yourself if you finally had the money you say you want? Not the fantasy version, not the clean, distant dream where everything changes without you changing. I mean the real version where more money would require you to be seen differently, make clearer decisions, stop apologizing for your price, stop shrinking your voice before someone else even reacts. Maybe there was a moment, a proposal, a client, a job, a conversation where you could have named what your work was worth, and right before the words came out, something in you tightened. You did not lose the opportunity in one dramatic collapse. You quietly stepped away from it. By the end of this, I want you to understand why you pull back right when you are closest to receiving more, and why the problem was never only money. The strange part is that the version of you that steps away from more money usually does not look afraid. It looks careful. It sounds measured. It can explain itself very well. It says the timing is not ideal. The market is unstable. The client might not pay. The role might demand too much. The raise might create pressure you are not ready to carry. And because all of that sounds responsible, no one questions it. Not even you. You call it maturity when, deep down, something in you is trying to stay familiar. You call it strategy when your body has already chosen the old room, the old ceiling, the old amount, the old version of being needed but not fully paid. I am not saying every pause is wrong. Some pauses are wisdom. Some doors are not yours. Some offers look rich on the outside and cost too much on the inside. But there is a difference between choosing slowly and shrinking quietly. There is a difference between waiting for the right moment and making every moment prove it is not right enough. There was a woman named Mara, 34, working in operations for a small logistics company outside Phoenix. She was making enough to survive, not enough to breathe. Around $52,000 a year, with responsibilities that belonged to someone making far more. She handled client problems before they reached the owner. She trained new hires without being called a manager. She caught billing mistakes, stayed late during shipment issues, answered messages while eating dinner, and still introduced herself by saying, "I just help keep things running." That sentence sounded humble, but it also kept her hidden. Then a larger company reached out. The new role had a real title, a salary close to $78,000, better benefits, and a team that would report to her. At first, she felt a rush she had not felt in years. Not greed, recognition. The kind that makes your chest open for 1 second before your old story rushes in to close it. By the next morning, Mara had built an entire argument against the very thing she had prayed for. The commute might be annoying, even though it was only 15 minutes longer. The new team might be difficult, even though she had handled difficult people for years. The salary increase might not be worth the pressure, even though the pressure was already in her life without the pay. She told her sister, "I just want to be realistic." But when she said it, she was not calm. She kept rubbing her thumb against the side of her mug. She kept checking the email and closing it. She imagined walking into that new office, being introduced as the person in charge, having people wait for her decision, having her name attached to outcomes. And that is when the money stopped feeling like relief. It started feeling like exposure. More income meant more visibility. More visibility meant fewer places to hide. Fewer places to hide meant she could no longer pretend she was only overlooked. Go famous. Vachanten. Veru fiefs. Is of Jerub spelen de Rusho. That is how resistance disguises itself. It does not always say, I am scared. Sometimes it says, let me think about it. Sometimes it says, maybe next year. Sometimes it says, I do not want to seem expensive. Sometimes it says, people are struggling, so who am I to ask for more? And before you notice, the opportunity has passed, but your self-image is safe. Safe from judgment. Safe from expectation. Safe from becoming the person your current circle may not understand. That is why this is not about blaming you. I know how tender this pattern can be. If you learned that being easy to accept mattered more than being fully valued, then asking for more can feel like betrayal. If you learned that peace comes from not needing too much, then receiving more can feel dangerous before it feels beautiful. So the problem is not that you do not want prosperity. The problem is that part of you still believes prosperity will ask you to lose the version of yourself that kept you loved. Here is the part that changes everything. Stepping back from more money was not always weakness. Sometimes it was protection. I know that may feel strange to hear, because you might be used to speaking to yourself with a hard voice. You might say, I keep ruining things, or I always get close and mess it up, or maybe I am just not built for more. But that voice skips the deeper question. What if the part of you that hesitates is not trying to destroy your future? What if it is trying to keep you safe in the only way it knows? Maybe you learned early that wanting too much created tension. Maybe you saw money make people cold, controlling, absent, or ashamed. Maybe you were praised for being low maintenance, easy, grateful, quiet. Maybe every time you asked for something bigger, someone made you feel dramatic. So your system adapted. It learned to desire with one foot on the brake. It learned to dream in private and negotiate against itself in public. It learned to reach toward prosperity, then pull back right before anyone could see how much you wanted it. That is why you cannot heal this pattern by yelling at yourself to be more confident. Confidence is not enough when your body associates expansion with danger. You need discernment. Because there is a difference between real wisdom and fear wearing wisdom's clothes. Real wisdom says, let me look at the details before I choose. Fear says, let me search until I find one detail that lets me escape. Real wisdom can wait without disappearing. Fear waits until the door closes, then calls the closed door proof that it was not meant for you. Real wisdom protects your values. Fear protects your old identity. Real wisdom asks, does this align with the life I am building? Fear asks, who will be uncomfortable if I become harder to ignore? And that is the difference that decides everything. If you do not learn to hear it, you will keep treating every opportunity like a threat. You will underprice your work and call it compassion. You will stay in rooms that drain you and call it loyalty. You will refuse visibility and call it peace. You will confuse the absence of pressure with the presence of purpose. But sometimes the pressure you are avoiding is not punishment. Sometimes it is the stretching that comes when your life is asking you to stop living below your own capacity. So I am going to ask you again, but this time I want you to let it land somewhere deeper. What would you have to admit about yourself if you finally had the money you say you want? Maybe you would have to admit that you are not as powerless as your old story says. Maybe you would have to admit that being underpaid has been painful, but also convenient, because it allowed you to resent the world without confronting your own refusal to ask. Maybe you would have to admit that you have been waiting for someone to discover you, approve you, choose you, raise your rate for you, open the door for you, and guarantee that nobody will judge you once you walk through it. And I say that with tenderness, because I know how heavy that can feel. But truth becomes cruel only when it is used to shame you. When it is used to shame you. So take this slowly. When was the last time you said no to something that could give you more, and called it being realistic? What were you protecting when you said that no? If that protection was not running the room, what would you ask for today that you keep swallowing before it reaches your mouth? Those 3 questions are not homework. They are a mirror. The first one shows the behavior. The second one reveals the hidden loyalty. The third one opens the door you have been circling, because the pattern is rarely random. There is usually a sequence. More comes close. Your mind scans for danger. Your body remembers an old cost. Then your language becomes reasonable enough to hide the retreat. Not now. Not this client. Not this price. Not this role. Not this conversation. And maybe once, that protection saved you from rejection, conflict, embarrassment, or abandonment. But today, It may be saving you from the very life you keep asking for. This is the real break in the belief. Scarcity is not always the absence of opportunity. Sometimes it is an active agreement with safety. And once you see that, money stops being only something you chase. It becomes something you are learning to tolerate, receive, hold, and no longer apologize for. You are not broken because you protected yourself, but you are allowed to stop letting protection make your decisions forever. Now breathe for a moment. Not every part of you needs to be conquered. Some parts need to be heard until they stop mistaking the present for the past. If you have been pulling away from more money, I do not want you to turn this into another reason to punish yourself. That would only dress the old wound in new language. The point is not to become louder, harder, colder, or careless with your choices. The point is to become honest enough to know when you are choosing from clarity and when you are choosing from contraction. Real prudence has peace inside it, even when the decision is difficult. Fear disguised as prudence has a tightness that keeps asking for more proof, more delay, more distance, more reasons to remain exactly where you already know how to survive. And when you learn to feel that difference, you do not have to force yourself into every opportunity. You simply stop abandoning the ones that are truly yours. The first change is quiet. You pause differently. You still look at the details, but you no longer search only for the detail that lets you escape. You ask, is this wrong for me, or is it larger than the identity I have been protecting? That question changes the room. Suddenly, charging the real price is not arrogance. It is alignment. Accepting praise without shrinking is not ego. It is reception. Letting someone see your skill is not danger. It is evidence. You start noticing the tiny rituals of self-reduction. The discount you offer before anyone asks, the nervous laugh after saying what you want, the way you explain your price like you are defending a crime, the way you say, it is not a big deal, when it took years to become this good. And once you notice those rituals, they lose some of their power. Not all of it. Enough to choose differently once. Then again. Then with a little more breath, you quote the fair price, and your voice shakes, but it does not disappear. You receive the compliment and let it stay in the air without rushing to minimize it. You read the job description twice, instead of closing it, because the title sounds too visible. You ask for the conversation you used to avoid. You let yourself imagine the practical shape of more, the bill paid before it becomes panic, the grocery run without mental math, the ability to help someone without emptying yourself, the course paid in full, the emergency handled without humiliation, the quiet morning where survival is not sitting on your chest before you even open your eyes. That is when prosperity stops being a shiny fantasy and becomes a capacity to hold more without apologizing, a capacity to be trusted with more without becoming someone you do not respect, a capacity to let money support the life your spirit has been whispering about while your habits kept negotiating it down. And slowly, the old ceiling loses authority, not all at once, not in a dramatic scene where everything suddenly becomes easy. It happens through sentences, through invoices, through applications, through the moment you do not over-explain, through the moment you do not over-explain, through the moment you do not lower the number just to make someone else comfortable, through the moment you say, I can do this, and do not laugh afterward to soften the truth. More money does not have to make you cold. It does not have to make you ungrateful. It does not have to separate you from your heart. It can make you steadier, clearer, more generous with a stronger foundation beneath you. This is the new perspective. You stop asking money to prove your worth, and you start letting your worth change the way you meet money. Then the door you once stepped away from begins to look different, not like a threat, like an invitation you are finally ready to enter without leaving yourself behind. So now we come back to the moment from the beginning, the chance, the number, the door, the conversation where you almost asked, almost accepted, almost let yourself be paid, seen, chosen, trusted at a higher level. You thought you stepped back because the timing was wrong. You thought you were protecting your peace. You thought money was the thing you were waiting on, as if one day it would arrive with enough proof to make you stop doubting your right to receive it. But maybe the deeper truth is this. The money was already approaching through an opportunity, a price, a request, a role, a decision. And the part of you that pulled away was not asking, can I earn this? It was asking, am I allowed to become the person who receives this without shrinking afterward? That is why this pattern has to end differently now, because if you do not see it, you will keep turning open doors into evidence that life is closed. You will keep saying you want more while negotiating yourself back into less. You will keep praying for expansion and then treating expansion like danger when it arrives wearing responsibility, visibility, or a bigger number. But not anymore. Not blindly. Not with the same old sentence dressed as wisdom. You can pause without disappearing. You can be careful without collapsing. You can want more without betraying the softness that made you human. You can be paid well and still be kind. You can hold more and still have a heart. You can rise and still belong to yourself. Enough shrinking. Enough apologizing. Enough waiting. There is a point where the old safety no longer saves you. It only delays you. It keeps you circling the same door, touching the handle, calling your hesitation realistic, then wondering why your life feels smaller than the truth inside you. And I do not want you to hate the part of yourself that did that. That part was trying to protect you from rejection, from judgment, from becoming visible before you felt ready. But readiness cannot be built only in hiding. At some point, you have to let your life meet the person you have been becoming in silence. You have to let your voice say the number. Let your hands send the proposal. Let your name sit beside the title. Let your work be valued without rushing to make it cheaper. This is the arrival. You are not waiting for the money to arrive. You are waiting for permission to deserve it. And maybe today is where that permission stops being something you beg the world to give you. Maybe today is where you give it back to yourself. If this touched something in you, tell me, because I want to keep building this path with you. Follow me here. And when this video ends, do not rush away from the screen. Let the final image stay with you for one breath longer, as if the version of you who no longer abandons prosperity is looking back and asking you to come closer. What would you stop calling realistic if you finally trusted yourself to receive more?